Hey folks, how you doing today? It is application season. We are like in the thick of it. And guess who sent me some regulations? Colorado. Big game 2021. The deadline that you never want to miss, Colorado doesn't give you any mulligans. So don't miss the deadline, April 6th, 2021. And if you look at the fine print here, it says the deadline is 8 p.m. Mountain Time. Anyhow, our great friends at Go Hunt always ask us to do these videos that give you the overview, and that's what this video is for. It's an overview. If you want super detail, you go to their website and you read their strategy articles. I always have this handy, the regulations. And if you go to Go Hunt and sign up for the Insider and use promo code Randy, they're going to give you a $50 gift card in their gear shop. So, we know the deadline is April 6th. People always say, well, that's fine. When did the results come out? Well, depends on the species. The big three of moose, goat, and sheep usually get staggered in the first half of May. Elk and deer and antelope usually come out late May, early June. So they're going to be holding your money for a little while. They want some upfront money. So here's what they want. They want you have to buy an annual small game license. It's the cheapest license you can buy to clear the hurdle of you got to hold one of these qualifying licenses. So you're going to buy an annual small game license. It's $84.96. And you have to buy a habitat stamp. That's $10.40. So you add all that together and you're in at a little over $95. And then for every species that you apply for, it's another $9. So it costs you some money up front. Some sunk costs that you're not going to get any of that back. So then we go to what does it cost for each of the species. And for this video, we're going to focus on deer and elk and some antelope. Deer, they give 35% of their non-resident tags, or 35% of their tags to non-residents. Yeah, right now we hear all the yelling and carrying on about, 10% here, 10% cap there. Well, Colorado is the most generous of all the western states to non-residents. They also give 35% of the elk tags. And there's a few places where if it's a super high demand, that can change a little bit. But I'm not going to get into all that. As a general rule, 35% of the deer and elk tags are allocated to non-residents. Super generous. And the fees aren't that bad. A deer tag is $412, elk tag $688, and an antelope tag is also $412. And with antelope, there is no cap on non-residents. Non-residents could draw every tag in certain units if they had the highest points and they drew. So, very generous. Like I said, moose, goat, sheep, that stuff, there's a different percentage. It's usually 10%. And when you look at the low cost to get into the game in Colorado, you end up with a lot of applicants. Last year, Colorado in 2020 had, I think it was 101,000 elk applicants and 53,000 more who just bought points. They weren't even in the draw. They're just over there buying points. And Colorado is the oldest point system out there. Their deer and elk system started in, I believe, 1988. So there are people out there that have over 30 points. And when we talk about these videos we did of point creep, Colorado is the king of point creep. So if you're starting, and I'll get to this at the end of the video and I give some ideas and some strategy thoughts, but just know that in Colorado, you're not going to catch that point curve way out there because it's a peer preference point system for the deer, elk, and antelope. And when we talk about preference point systems, right, we're talking about you with the most points gets the tag. If you have 10 points and I have 2, and we apply for the same hunt code, and let's say you're the highest point holder there. You get a tag because you're at 10. Then they go and say, all right, anyone at 9? Yeah, there's 5 people at 9. Anyone at 8? Yeah, there were 10 people at 8. Oops, all the tags have been taken Anyone 7 and below, Randy, you only had 2 points, too bad for you. So he or she with the most points gets the tag under a preference point system. And that's what they use for deer, elk, and antelope. Then there's some other things you need to know in Colorado. Age, you got to be 12 by December 31st of the year you're applying. Hunter ed, I don't get a pass in Colorado like I do in some of the other states. I'm not this old. If you were born after January 1, 1949, you need hunter ed. There's a lot of weapons restriction or restricted weapons hunts in Colorado. They have some really good archery hunts, some really good muzzleloader hunts, but specifically to muzzleloader, they have a lot of restrictions. So make sure you know what those specific weapon restrictions are before you apply. And they're all in here. I'm not going to go into all the details of them in here, but that's where you can find them. You can return a tag. Now, there's dates of when you got to do it by in order to get some, as a general rule, and again, go read about it out on Go Hunt or read it in the regulations. But if you get the choice of either I want my money back or I want my points back, and you got to do it within a certain time before the season starts. That's been changing almost every year. It didn't look to change this year, but what has changed this year, in the past couple of years, Colorado had this system for how they reissued the tags that got returned. Well, it's changing in a big way this year, and it's really complicated. So I'm not going to go into that either, other than to know you can return your tag if something comes up, and you can get your points restored if you get it returned within a certain period of time, but you're probably not going to get your money back. So in a state with a preference point system like this, it's really simple to look at what the draw odds are. You either have, based on last year, 100% draw odds, or you have 0% draw odds, right? If you're below the cutoff of what the point level was last year, you aren't getting a tag. Well, in last year's draw, if you were below the point level, you aren't getting a tag. If you're above the point cutoff threshold, you get a tag. It's really simple. There's none of this squaring of points and bonus this and raffle tickets that and random da-da-da. It's cut and dried. The downside is, if you're new to the Colorado system, you're behind a lot of people. A lot of people. So think about that. When we talk about, is a state your short-term, mid-term, or long-term plan? In most instances, Colorado for elk is going to be your short-term or mid-term plan. Unless you're already well into the system, it's not going to be your long-term plan. Now for deer, it's probably going to be mid-term or long-term plan, depending on what weapon type you use and what season dates you're willing to hunt. It could be short-term, but the better deer hunts are going to take 5 to 10 points, 5, 6, 7, 8 points, whatever. And one thing that drives the applications in Colorado is the season dates. Colorado embarks on a 5-year season date setting process every 5 years. And then they say, all right, we've been through this. Here's what the calendar dates will be for the next 5 years. And what do people do? They look at that and say, well, I want to hunt elk if it's earlier in October. I want that first rifle season. Like last year, I knew that first rifle season was October 10th. I'm like, it only takes 2 points for this unit. I got 3, I'm jumping in. And I did, and I drew the tag and I shot a bull. And it was bugling, it was just what I hoped for. I caught that very tail end of the rut. Now this year it rolls forward 6 days, and that's a much lower likelihood that you're gonna catch the rutting activity that we had. So there's an analysis going on among almost all the applicants of, do I want to do first rifle elk this year, or do I want to wait based on this 5-year season structure that Colorado publishes? In deer, it's almost the opposite. In deer, people look at the 3rd rifle season and they say, Sometimes that ends November 4th or 5th. Gosh, the rut really isn't getting going. Well, this year they've changed it a lot, and the third season is in the absolute peak rut of November. And a bunch of people saw that last year, so there was a whole bunch of people that just bought points. And they were waiting for 2021 when these season dates rolled way into November. And this year, it's going to be really hard to draw a deer tag in Colorado. So if you looked at last year and said, wow, I could draw this third season tag with 5 points, and you apply this year with 6 points, don't be upset if you didn't draw. This year, it's probably going to double or triple the number of points it takes to draw some of those later third and fourth season hunts compared to what it was last year. So you can put that kind of in your strategy, right? You can say, well, if everybody's going to go and hunt or try for third season, there's still some units that are super quality hunts. The quality of deer is great. I just got to hunt them in second rifle season. The same deer are there, but they're harder to kill because they're not in the rut. So in that instance, there's some strategy you can use based on Colorado publishing this 5-year forward projected calendar. And you can almost predict what the higher point holders are going to be doing because they're trying to get the most value out of their points. So when it comes to elk, if I had an application tip for elk, it would be, if you're newer to this system, don't think that you're going to draw one of the really hard to draw units up in the Northwest or some of the even Unit 40, Unit 76, Unit 61, some of those. You're never going to catch it. So think about how many points you have and go for one of the hunts that takes 2, 3, 4, 5 points and go do that. You'll have a ton of fun. And there are some quality bulls that get shot every year on those hunts that only take 3, 4, 5 points. If you apply in Colorado and you're going to get, trust me, you're going to get frustrated because the point creep is every year you gain a point, it takes like another extra point the following year. Or you gain 4 points over that 4-year period, and the number of points it took for your unit jumped by 5. So you fell back a point. So with elk, don't get your hopes up if you're not already in the system. Be reasonable about it, and you're going to have some amazing elk hunting. You're going to get to go very often. You're going to have great conditions, great populations, and you're probably going to have some success. So those are the two things I'd look at as far as strategy for elk and for deer, is look at the calendars and then just be realistic. One of the things you run into in Colorado is they have, and this is why Colorado can be a short-term elk option every year. They have 90 some units in the west half of the state that in the second rifle and third rifle season, it's over the counter. You just buy your tag and off you go. No draw, just off you go. It's the only state in the West that has an unlimited number of over-the-counter tags for such a vast number of units. So be thinking about that. Now, if you're an archery hunter or muzzleloader hunter, all of those elk hunts have went to limited entry draw. But a lot of them, it's a limited entry draw, but you can draw with 0 points or maybe 1 point, depending on which unit you're looking at. So think about that. Probably one thing that where Colorado is unique from its other western states is if you ever look at your map, you'll see these little powder blue sections that are state trust lands. Those state trust lands are held by the state land board, which is different than the Game and Fish Department. State land boards hold these to raise money for the school system. In most states, a deal has been struck between the game department and the school department that, hey, if someone has a hunting license, they can hunt these powder blue lands you see on your map. Not in Colorado. In Colorado, the hunting on those lands is controlled by the lessee. So you need permission from whoever is leasing that land. Or in many instances, the lessee is Colorado Parks and Wildlife, who comes and leases the hunting access to that. But it's not a very big percentage. It's less than 20% of those lands are leased by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. So when you're doing your planning and your research, don't assume that you're going to be able to hunt those little light blue sections that you see on a map. They may not be leased by Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and if that is the case, you're either going to pay a trespass fee or you're possibly just not going to be able to go hunt those areas. So Colorado's pretty easy. If you want to really deep dive into all this, way more than what I've talked about here, Brady and Trail, Brandon, all those guys out at Go Hunt, they get into this in such deep level, way more than what we can do in a 10-minute video. Go out there, sign up for the Insider, use promo code RANDY, and they'll give you a $50 gift card. But don't miss the deadline of April 6th. Make sure you read through the regulations. And in just about every state now, you see that it says, what's new, 2021. That's the very first page I read in every regulations is what's new. And I think Colorado only has one page of new stuff this year. Yeah, they only have one page of things that changed from last year. So anyhow, apply. See if it fits your budget. It's a pretty modest upfront fee. Colorado might be the place for you.